What's up, everyone? Welcome into the All 22 NFL podcast, the official podcast of the All 22 fantasy football platform. It's the only fantasy football game with full 53-man rosters, which includes offensive linemen, where you get to choose personnel packages and have access to PFF grading and advanced stats to make decisions each week. To learn more and sign up, go to all-22.com. Ray, it's been an unbelievable week. I don't know if you feel that way, but for me, it's been a knockout week, probably one of the best of my life. And I can't give you one specific reason why yet, but there is a pretty big reason why.
Yeah, it's coming. Just stay tuned. You know, we endured blistering winds and scorching deserts, and we climbed to the highest room of the tallest tower to be able to provide this for all of our loving fans and users. So just keep an eye out on our socials. It's coming very soon. So very, very excited about that as we sit here today on the first day of August in the year 2024.
Keep an eye out. If you don't follow us on social media, I highly recommend it. At all22_PFF is where you could find us on all the major platforms. And I'm actually going to start the episode with this because I usually end it and it might be too late. People might shut us down, but it's super helpful if you give us a like, leave a comment on the podcast wherever you watch or listen. It's super helpful for the algorithm. It gets more people to see it, but that's small potatoes compared to what's coming. We're so excited to be able to say more about it, but we can't today. But by the time you listen to this, it will probably be there. So keep an eye out. Very exciting. Anyway, big week for some NFL players too. There's three major contracts got done this week. Two on the offensive line, specifically at the tackle position, and then one at the receiver position. So the big one that we'd all been waiting for, literally like waiting for this for a long time. One of my favorite players in the NFL, guy that I drafted in all 22 as a rookie, and I loved him from the start. So I'm gonna take a win on this one. Tristan Wirfs gets $140 million, $28 million a year. That's first in both categories. This is now the highest paid tackle in NFL history. Last year, 83.1 grade in PFF, 57.2 points in all 22. I think that was good for about fifth as well. This is the premier tackle in the NFL today. We're talking about Trent Williams being the guy, the role model for every tackle in the league. Tristan Wirfs might end up being that next guy.
Yeah, this is and what's crazy is like last year was kind of considered a down year for him, and he was still by pretty much any metric a top 10 tackle in the league. He's a cornerstone guy. Literally since the time he came into the league, you've got 80 plus season grades throughout the board here for his first 4 years consecutively. He's incredibly consistent run and pass blocking. He's a cornerstone for Tampa. He's a cornerstone for your all 22 teams if you were lucky enough to draft him. As you mentioned, Chris, when we were kind of doing this on the back of a napkin way back when, in an inaugural draft when he was a rookie, but whether you snagged him up in your startup draft as a user thereafter, he's been everything you could have hoped for and more. Still just 25 years old, so you got plenty of time left, plenty of years of elite tackle play left at a position that, again, we mentioned there's probably more good ones than there are on the interior of the offensive line, but these guys are still incredibly hard to find. And when you get one like this, you hold on for dear life and you keep him as long as you can. And so kudos to him. He deserves it. And someone's finally pushing back on the craziness that is quarterback contracts, who are clearly just in a constant quest to dominate the positional weight until they own all 100%. And we're just running 11 quarterbacks out there on the field at one point in time, it seems like.
Yeah, for sure. And just a reminder for people, Tristan Wirfs is still 25 years old. So this is a young tackle, and it's exactly the advantage you want to get in these rookie drafts, right? Draft a guy like that can be a high-end starter for you for multiple years before that contract hits in, because now it does make it a little bit harder for the Bucs to do other things. But they got their quarterback on a relatively affordable deal as well with Baker, right? So maybe they felt they could do that. Another guy that got paid is, to a much lesser degree, is Taylor Decker, right? $60 million, $20 million a year. It's a 3-year deal. He was PFF's eighth highest graded tackle, 81.1 last year. In all 22, he had 49.3 fantasy points. But his contract, $60 million, is actually tied for 18th, right? But the $20 million a year is much higher. It's tied for 9th overall for the tackle position. He's been good, right? Like, this is model of consistency throughout his career. Not a lot of ups and downs for Taylor Decker. He's been Mr. Consistent. And you're talking about this Detroit team that's very up and coming, right? And they're trying to finally get to the promised land, which is the Super Bowl. They were so close last year. Taylor Decker is a guy that is a cornerstone for that team to help them get there. He's a leader for that group. So happy for Taylor Decker. But again, it's a huge boost. Tristan Wirfs, Taylor Decker getting those big contracts. It just helps that tackle position in all 22 as those weights next year will get a big increase.
He's still on Steve's fantasy team, right? Taylor Decker?
Taylor Decker, he is on Steve's fantasy team, yes. He can never let him go now because it's part of the intro. No shot.
We can't propose any trades for him, nothing. Steve's just got to ride that one out till he retires.
Exactly. Last contract to talk about is DJ Moore. Totally different world than the other two guys, right? DJ Moore has been around the league for a little while, but maybe not as long as Taylor Decker, right? And while Taylor Decker has never probably been a top 5 receiver, DJ Moore last year was a top 5 receiver, 83.1 grade in PFF. He gets a big deal, but how do you pay somebody like DJ Moore, right? Who has been kind of this really good receiver, really promising, goes to the Bears last year and really just broke out again. Not that he hasn't been good, but like kind of went to that next level last year. They kind of did the right thing, right? He didn't get top tier of the market money, but he lands at 5th, right? $110 million, 5th overall in terms of overall money, and then $27.5 million a year, which is good for 7th annually. So I'm really happy for DJ Moore getting his money. I think he's proven himself in the league at this point, and he's the type of receiver I actually really like. I like a guy that can do it all. I like a guy that prides himself on his route running abilities and his ability to just get open consistently. So I think that ages well, right? So I don't really have concerns for the Bears on that kind of contract.
Yeah, to get him at that price tag, you absolutely have to do it. He's 27 years old, and so the way that contract is structured and these contracts are structured throughout the league now, it's really about those first 3 years. So you're looking at his 27, 28, 29 seasons with Caleb Williams as Caleb Williams develops into the pro that he's going to become. And usually after that 3rd year, you can get out without much ramification of those deals. So as Moore's turning 30, maybe 31, depending on how long he sticks around, it's the perfect sort of exit hatch for the Bears. And as an all 22 user, you're just sort of riding that same exact timeline of DJ Moore on the Bears now. He's finally gotten a good quarterback. He's no longer dealing with just absolute slop since basically the moment he entered this league. And so now you have 3 years of DJ Moore in his prime for the remainder of his prime with the best quarterback he has played with since entering the NFL. So you can't really ask for anything else as a DJ Moore user. I think everything just sort of fits like a glove with this situation. It's good for everybody involved.
Right. And you can do this, right, again, because you have that rookie contract deal. It gives them that flexibility. They can pay some guys and help Caleb Williams settle in as a top quarterback, right? Because that's what they're trying to do. They've struggled with that. The point of today's episode, though, is going to be talking about centers. And center is a really interesting position because I went into it thinking that it'd be more like a linebacker where I don't trust anyone. And that wasn't necessarily the case, right? I think I got a list of 10 or so that I have some faith in. And I think I got to about 24 of guys that I feel good about investing in all 22, which means that you have a starter and a backup in a 12-team league, right? So we're going to get you to that point. We're going to do a 24-player ranking to get you your starter and your backup. And the conversation for me at center has to start with 2 people and only 2 for my tier 1. And that's Creed Humphrey on the Chiefs and Tyler Linderbaum in Baltimore. To me, those are the 2 guys that are still young enough and proven enough to invest in semi-early. Center is one of the lowest value positions in the game. So it's not a position you want to draft in maybe the first 5-6 rounds. I think when you start getting to round 6, 7, maybe 8 is when you say, all right, Creed Humphrey is special enough, Tyler Linderbaum is special enough, time to buy in, right? I can get a big advantage getting a guy like that. Creed Humphrey, you have him up here, right? 25 years old, 78.2 grade last year, but that was actually his worst year as a pro in year 3. It was 90s before that in his first and second year. There was a lot of change in Kansas City on that offensive line. The tackle duo was different. I think it's starting to get its feet again, right? They need to do that. They drafted a couple guys this year to help bolster that offensive line. I don't have any concerns about Creed Humphrey. In my mind, he's the clear number 1 at the position. Tyler Linderbaum in Baltimore, 78.3 grade last year, 24 years old. Just been solid so far, but I think the path is definitely up, right? This is a position that typically takes a lot of time for a guy to step into the league with a 74.7 grade as a rookie. Very, very promising for an undersized center like Tyler Linderbaum.
Yeah, I can't leave off Frank Ragnow. I still can't. Even if he's third, I would not put him in a different tier because yes, he's 28 years old, but he's 28 years old. He's probably got 5 years left. And he's a phenomenal player who will play through a broken throat and all types of ligament injuries and anything else. Even if his body's hanging on by literal threads, he will go out there and perform at a high level. That is a heck of a lot of green in his just weekly grades and snaps throughout this past season. Again, was actually the top overall center last season in 2023. And in top 5 for both run and pass blocking. Detroit's only gotten better, and they didn't lose their offensive coordinator. I mean, they're just poised to kind of pick up where they left off here. Even if you see guys like Jahmyr Gibbs get a bigger role now heading into year 2, kind of opening up the offense even more, providing some more explosive plays, and it starts at that spine with Frank Ragnow. So I'm not just going to let you but what's it called? Like age discriminate against Frank Ragnow when he is still only 28 years old and he's a center. We just had Kelsey retire at 35, 36 years old, and he was still at the top of his game. So I'm still not worried about longevity yet when it comes to Ragnow. I'm looking at 4+ years at least, and that's enough for me to not knock him down a peg.
I want to agree with you because I love Frank Ragnow. And like you said, he's one of the toughest players in the league.
Clearly don't love Frank Ragnow if you're not going to agree with me.
You watch his videos, right? Some of his highlights, this is one of the best centers in the NFL, if not currently with Jason Kelsey retiring, the best center in the NFL. It's possible. But the injuries, although he's played through a lot of them, there has been a lot of them. And I don't know if it's going to be easy for that to continue as he gets older, right? And they haven't just been minor things. Like you said, kind of massive things have happened to this guy, and he's played through a lot of it, right? But it was just 3 years ago. He only played 4 games. I really like Frank Ragnow. I struggled because there was 2 guys I have in tier 2 as well. It's tier 1 is 2 players. Tier 2 is 2 players. I had both of those guys in tier 1 at first. And then I was like, you know what? I don't think so. I don't think you put Creed and Linderbaum on the same level as Frank and the other guy I have in my tier 2. That's why I held him out. But I think either way, you're going to end up with Creed as 1, Linderbaum as 2, and Ragnow as 3. So whether they're in the same tier or not, that's probably the order.
That's probably the order. But the thing that keeps me believing or focusing on them being in the same tier is the fact that, to me, if I'm addressing center early, it's one of those 3 names. If I'm addressing center in the first 8 rounds of the draft, it's one of those 3 names. Even someone like that I'm really high on, like a Graham Barton or something that we'll get to a bit later, I'm sure. I'm not taking them in the top 8 rounds, maybe even top 10 or 12 rounds. If I'm investing early in center and using one of my top 8 or so picks in a startup draft at the position, to me, it's only those 3 names. And then everything else comes after that. And that, to me, is why I keep them in the tiers. Maybe we're arguing semantics, but if we want to talk a bit of strategy here for our listeners, that's my line of demarcation and why I would say I would rather go for a 3-person or 3-player tier at center as opposed to 2 2-person tiers at the top.
So the conversation changes with the other guy, and that's where I'm going to challenge you, right? Drew
Okay.
Dalman on Atlanta is 25 years old and had an 82.3 grade last year. That is also a fantastic situation that's only gotten better, right? He's got the mature quarterback now to help him out, better coaching, and a fantastic offensive line around him. Dalman is a guy that proved himself last year at a level that I don't think a lot of people were expecting, right? Now that he's stepped up and proven that he can be that guy, now that the coaching staff has gotten better, now that the quarterback situation has gotten better, is there a world, and I'm telling you for me there is, I think there's a world where I consider taking him over Frank Ragnow, or at least the conversation is happening in my mind, which means to me that they need to be in the same tier.
This could be what I love to deem as an arbitrage opportunity for our listeners, but I think Drew Dalman is still going under the radar, and you can get him later than this. You can get him probably around 13, I would say. And to me, I could see another Drew Dalman coming from the ranks of young guys like a Graham Barton. Maybe have to wait a year or two, or whatever it is, until they kind of reach that peak. But until I see it again from Drew Dalman, which it can absolutely happen, I'll pull him back up again. I'm not putting him in that tier just yet. We've got one high 70s, one mid 60s, one low 80s. You give me another 80 plus type of year, and then I can look back and say, yeah, offense has gotten better, coaching, all those other factors you mentioned. Then I would put him in that tier. But I need one more. With Ragnow, I can point to at least 4 different years where he was top 5 in the game at his position, even not being fully healthy. I can't do the same for a guy like Dalman just yet.
Well, he's three years younger, right? So that makes sense. But again, you might be a year too late, right? Somebody else is going to do it in round 11 or 12, and you missed the boat, right? So
sure,
I don't think you can wait a year, right? If you're doing a startup draft, like that guy's going to get taken by somebody that knows something, and he's going to have his great year, and you're going to be a year too late. So, but I agree with you. For this year, Ragnow is above him, but I think I'm asking myself long and hard who I want, Dalman or Ragnow. So again, I think the tiers right now are Humphrey, Linderbaum in tier 1 and Ragnow and Dalman in tier 2. And I'm going Humphrey, Linderbaum, Ragnow, Dalman.
If I'm as convicted as you are about Dalman, wherever I feel is the best place to draft him, I'm drafting instead like a Brock Bowers and then getting Dalman a round or two later, because I know that I can wait on someone like Dalman. I can't wait on some of these other names that are going to go first, even if you're as high on him as you are, because it's sort of playing the consensus there. If they're that close, then sure, don't draft Ragnow in the 8th, but don't draft Dalman in the 8th either. Then just let someone else take Ragnow and then draft Dalman a little bit later, and you got yourself a nice young tight end or something, or maybe you get I don't know, a boss safety or something that might be sitting there instead, and you can kind of circle back around and feel like you get an edge by taking Dalman a bit later than others that you deem at that same level, but were taken a round or two earlier.
Sure, I think that's fine. Are you comfortable saying Humphrey at 1, Linderbaum at 2, Ragnow at 3, and Dalman at 4?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, so that's tiers 1 and 2 for me. If you want to argue that that's just tier 1, that's fine as well. But getting into tier 3, this is similar to running back, where my tier 3 is really tier 3A and tier 3B. And the difference between the two is, do you want the guy that's still pretty young and doing pretty well, that you get something, that's a sure thing? Or do you want to take the young guy that just hasn't proven anything yet, but that you're high on, right? And those to me are the different tiers, and you could rank one above the other, and it really depends on how you look at the situation. So I'm going to give you tier 3A first, which is the veterans. Okay. So that's Eric McCoy from the Saints, who's still 26 years old, had a 79.4 grade last year, probably the best grade of his career with with new quarterback Derek Carr. So I like that situation again for McCoy with Carr being back. I think that makes a lot of sense. Lloyd Cushenberry, 26 years old, going from Denver to Tennessee, 73.3 grade last year, has been very good. And I think a lot of people in the NFL consider him at this point to be one of the best centers in the NFL. Ethan Pokic with Cleveland, 29 years old, 71.4. Reports on him have been fantastic. Again, just another really solid player in the middle of a very good offensive line that knows how to run the ball really well and play to lineman's strengths, right? With probably two of the best guards in the NFL right next to him. Then you have Andre James in Vegas, which is kind of the other end of the spectrum, who's 27 years old, 74.6 grade last year, and kind of came out of nowhere and just did a fantastic job, right? No quarterback, no, coaching staff, and they bring in Antonio Pierce, and you see the end of that year was really promising. There was one bad week in there. Otherwise, that's a lot of green, right? So Andre James kind of on an island on that offensive line besides Colton Miller being there. Did a great job last year. It's definitely somebody to watch. Aaron Brewer going to Miami this year, 26 years old, 71.6 grade last year, is also getting rave reviews. We know that Miami system just leans towards making offensive linemen better without having to do all that much, right? It's not like Aaron Brewer is going to have a huge increased workload going to Miami. It's actually going to be a much easier situation for him, which should bring up that grading. And then the last guy on the list of tier 3A is Tyler Biadasz in Washington, 26 years old, 68.6 grade. I think he's probably towards the end of the spectrum for me of this group. But again, at 26 years old, going to a system that has a new coach, new quarterback, right? Like, it's things to like. And one thing that kind of goes under the radar is how much running quarterbacks help offensive linemen, right? And you insert Jaden Daniels. While Jaden Daniels is an excellent pocket thrower as well, the running ability sets him apart, right? Which is why he was the number 2 overall pick in the draft, in a very loaded draft. Goes to Washington with Tyler Biadasz there. It should make his job just that much easier. So I actually think could be kind of a special situation for him. And I'll pause there before giving you tier 3B.
Tier 3B. Okay. Well, I'll just hit on the mobile quarterback point too, because sometimes people conflate two different things, which is that mobile quarterbacks can sometimes make things hard for their offensive linemen, namely the tackles, because they move around a lot back there. They're not sure exactly, they mean the linemen are not exactly sure where that quarterback's going to be. They don't stay in one spot, so they're not sure where the pocket's going to end up. Yeah, that is true. On the flip side, the rush from the opposing defensive front is different. They are playing a bit more contained. It's easier to manage. And then especially on the interior as well, when a mobile quarterback can buy some time, the approach from the defense is just different. And that makes it easier on linemen. You don't necessarily get the screaming off the snap, just shoot a gap and worry about what happens later type of approach, because any false steps can lead to the defense being gashed by a mobile quarterback, especially someone as explosive as Jaden Daniels. With that said, I would not put Tyler Biadasz in this tier after dealing with him for the last 4 years. I would put him, I think he is squarely in tier 4, but I would not have him in the third tier here. Andre James, again, I kind of like what they're doing a little bit. Colton Miller, Andre James. I think Jackson Powers Johnson is dealing with a little bit of a concussion now, but if he's alongside him on the interior over there at guard, you kind of have the makings a little bit of a pretty decent offensive line there. Everything else is falling apart, so I'm not expecting anything spectacular, but I could see a repeat of his 2023 performance, which to me puts him in this same tier, which again, others are maybe low on the Raiders, and I'm sitting there around 16 and he's still on the board, and I could fill my center spot with someone who graded out as a top 10 center over the course of the entire season last year in what was already a pretty poor situation. Then I'm going to go ahead and do that. I think that's a great spot for someone in this range or vicinity of performance wise. I'm taking Andre James all day at a place like round 16 in a startup. One last thing I'll say to all the names you mentioned is for someone who we're on this podcast and we talk about how and maybe I'm putting too much in the we portion of this, and maybe it's more me or I talk about how I don't like the vibes coming out of New Orleans. You sure like a whole heck of a lot of their individual players for this season, and that includes Eric McCoy. He certainly did bounce back last year. I'm just still not sure I like the vibes. But, I mean, the data would kind of prove me wrong here because he did, in fact, bounce back, and then why get worse? He was in his prime. Maybe, he's 26 years old, has a breakout, touching 80, so to speak, top 5 graded center in the entire league. And he's still in his prime. He's going to be 27 years old. So maybe I'm wrong. It's like one of those AITA things, if you know what that means, or you could look it up if you don't. Maybe that's me when it comes to some of these Saints players. You might be proving me right here or proving me wrong here.
Only time will tell, right? And it is a very boomer bust situation down in New Orleans. But what I've talked about is they take a lot of the guys I like, right? They draft like I would. It's kind of bizarre, but they don't necessarily sign some of the guys that I would. So that's where the difference happens, right? They pay Alvin Kamara and things like that. Like I wouldn't do that, right? And that is a big difference. That's tier 3A. And like I said, tier 3B is more the younger, unproven guys, right? Guys that you might pick above some of those other guys, and maybe I would. And I'll start the list with 3 guys that I think I probably would, and that's Cam Jurgens in Philadelphia, who was a college center, moved to guard because they had the best center in football already in Jason Kelce, right? He's now going to be switching back to center, and I like that, right? Like this is one of the best offensive lines in football. It's one of the best running games in football with now Saquon Barkley being there. Jalen Hurts can run as well. You have great receivers that opens things up for these guys. It's just a fantastic offensive situation. And Cam Jurgens could be slipping into like an all-pro spot just out of ease. And the reason is because he's a guard in the system currently, Ray. So
okay, I was like, how the heck do we spell his name?
Because he wasn't a center last year, but that will be updated before the season. You know my boy, right? You know my boy. He was also a guard last year, but he's moving to center potentially. Oh, there's the ring.
Alarm.
Sorry, everyone. I'm going to mute myself, Ray. Talk about Cam Jurgens a little bit.
Oh, great. It's going to be a stark difference from what you just said. I do not like Cam Jurgens. Everything about Cam Jurgens that I do like has everything to do with what's around him, because it is again, a mobile quarterback offense with now a fantastic running back alongside him and 2 great receivers. So it's pretty much all the threats around him and the strong offensive tackles that they have in Philadelphia. So he's in an environment that is so conducive for him to succeed. But his individual performances to date, and even coming out of, I believe, Nebraska in college a couple of years ago, I was not a huge fan. I think it's a massive downgrade from what they had at center. But for him, grade-wise, I'm sure over the course of a full season, he can probably go ahead and flirt with touching 70 overall, maybe grade in that top 20-ish range for centers. Again, but to me, that's more so the environment than anything long-lasting with Cam Jurgens himself. Maybe I'm a hater, but that's not someone I'm specifically targeting to fill my starter spot at the very least at center. So if someone wants to go ahead, they like the Eagles and everything that's around them, and they want to go ahead and take them in those late teens, that, round 18, 19, by all means, go right ahead. That's what you're going to do to fill your, quote unquote, lesser value position. Go for it. I'm going to go ahead and take a chance elsewhere.
Okay. And that's fair. And that's basically can be said about everybody in tier 3B, right? Like they're the unproven. It's if you like it. The next guy I like a lot from the Rams that potentially is moving to center, Steve Avila, right? My boy,
gosh,
24 years old, 61.1 grade in his rookie season. He showed flashes though. Coaching staff loves him there. He had some good weeks. This is a guy that I love the college tape. I think he will be natural at center. So I like it, right? Again, you don't know what to expect, but if you believe in Sean McVay and if you believe what they're doing there in LA, this is a guy that I would invest in and taking a risk on. Next guy, Joe Tippmann, right? Joe Tippmann for the Jets, 23 years old, also a rookie last year, 61 grade as well. He looked like at times like he could be fantastic, right? But at other times, that situation was just so bad, it was hard to get anything out of him, right? But at the end of the year, you do see some green. This is a guy that's massive body type, resembles the play of Creed Humphrey a little bit, right? You see some of those similarities. I like him. And it's definitely with Rodgers being there now, being back on that team. They've added some other pieces to that offensive line. They've added receiving weapons. the situation just overall should be better. Another year for Tittman under his belt, another offseason. I expect it to be better.
Yeah, if Hitman was in Philadelphia, then forget about it. He would be above tier 3A and B. He would be someone that I would pick in the top. I'd pick him in round 11 if he's there pretty much any time, because I think he would be fantastic there. But he's not. This year, I think he's going to be great. The question with him, and then again, the play there is what happens when Rodgers is gone. Does that offense revert back to what it has been the last several years and probably even longer than that? And what does that do to his prospects long term? They have some nice pieces, so maybe it's just a matter of having an effective plan at the quarterback position post Rodgers. But right now, we don't know what that is. So that's a big, giant question mark. So if you like Joe Tittman, and again, you take him in, I don't know, top 15 rounds, maybe around 13, 14-ish, as people are kind of starting to fill out their depth chart and they're scanning probably less so for positional value and more so just young players they like. Tittman would fall into that range. And I think that's when he'll get on a lot of people's radar. So if you can get him and you do have an effective season from him, depending on how things play out in New York, that's one of those sell high candidates 12 months from now or 9 months from now or whatever it is. I think there's a potential play there. So again, probably moving 4 steps ahead, but I like Joe Tittman's individual prospects. I think the environment around him is kind of what will determine or what will shape his long-term prospects here beyond 2024 and how much of a cornerstone he can actually be for you. Because we liked him coming out. I think there's a lot to like there, but it's not always about the individual. It's a lot about the environment. And that's a question mark in the, longer term future.
Right. And then there's 3 rookies from this draft that I was extremely high on in the draft that I think deserve to be in this conversation. And that's Graham Barton, who landed in Tampa Bay. He's 22 years old. Zach Frazier, who landed in Pittsburgh, also 22 years old. And then depending on if they put him at center or not, and I think you said you've seen that they are, it's Cooper Beebe, right? In Dallas, 23 years old. He was like my pet cat during this draft process. So 3 really young guys that have the draft pedigree at this point and were extremely promising prospects sliding into a position that, over the last few years haven't really had that many guys, at least at the draft that we were super like, hey, this is a must buy guy.
Yeah, and they all come with a bit of their own question mark, right? You have injuries a bit with Frazier and with Barton. Beebe, it's where is he ultimately going to end up? Again, if you're a risk taker, then those names could be the first center that you draft. At the very least, I think Barton and Frazier, because they're going to play at that spot and provide something. You like their athletic upside, presumably. So you're taking a roll of the dice there, but you're looking for a big reward. That I totally get. Someone like Cooper Beebe, who maybe he has a similar type of upside to those 2 names at the center position. There's 2 pathways this could go. Currently, he is playing mostly center in training camp in a battle with Brock Hoffman in Dallas, but that staff really likes Brock Hoffman. They see little to no drop-off between Hoffman and Biadasz from last season. But there's also this kind of lingering storyline that's out there. It's kind of on the periphery in Dallas. Is this Zach Martin's last year? If so, and if Brock Hoffman performs well enough to hold on to the center job through this season, which he currently has a bit of an inside track on because he's a veteran and coaches like that sort of thing at a position like center, at least if they're, coaches from decades prior, like Mike McCarthy certainly is, then you could see Cooper Beebe slide over to right guard and perhaps be the successor to Zach Martin if things play out that way. It's certainly a possibility. I think it's more 65-35 that he ends up at center for the long term, but depending on how things play out, he may ultimately end up as a guard. So that's a name, if you liked him during the draft or you just kind of like what you've read up on him and kind of seen from him, I still would not take him as the first center I draft in a startup draft because of that uncertainty. You could kind of be, again, on the outside looking in at center if that is your primary plan at the position, because he may end up just staying at guard. And now you're, shopping for scraps or you're drafting real late to try to fill center. And it's not, you seem to think it's deeper than I do, but I think we both agree it's not a terribly deep position compared to some others in the league. So because of that, Cooper Beebe probably slides down a bit, maybe early 20s or so. You can kind of get him if he's kind of hidden there among some of those other names at a position like guard. And you attack center earlier on with, if you're looking for younger guys like a Graham Barton, like a Zach Frazier in those kind of early teens rounds. That's how I would see it. I would not put my chips all or my eggs all in the Cooper Beebe at center basket, because that could go a number of different ways.
For sure. I think you could get him later than the other guys, for sure. But I do think he needs to be in this conversation. And we're already that was 16 names already, right? And this is a position you only start one guy. So being at 16 with a bunch of promising names, stop the count. It's pretty good. And my tier 4, which I haven't said yet, but it's a lot of the older vets that are still playing at a very high level. So we won't get into that yet, but I think we need to now start to rank the guys that we've talked about, right? Where does it begin for you? Is it Tittman?
If I'm advising someone, it's probably Tittman. If I'm on the clock, I'm shooting dice, I might take Barton, because I just like that. I chase that upside. So again, I'm the wrong guy to ask. If I'm advising somebody, it's probably Tittman, though.
Okay, I think it's Tittman for me too. So that'll get us to 5. I could see a world where Barton and Frazier are in the same breath for me. I love Frazier in Pittsburgh. I like what they've done with the offensive line. I like what they did at quarterback too. It's the best coaching staff in my mind out of the group of teams that we're talking about here. So I think those might be the next 2 guys just in general for me. But again, if you're getting one of those 2 guys, you need to make sure that you're also getting one of the other older guys at some point, right? Like you need to double down. You can't just go into the season with Zach Frazier and Graham Barton, in my mind.
Okay, so all the names up until this point, we'll say, those are guys, if you land them in your draft first, 15 rounds, from whichever names that we've posted so far prior to this number, that's your clear center. Anything beyond this, you're sort of playing an age game here. You're getting a vet to pair with a young guy and vice versa, whichever one goes first.
See, I think the risk is worth it on Barton and Frazier if you're taking them as the 6th and 7th center to go off the board. But I also understand somebody's going to be sitting there at pick 17th round, and Eric McCoy, Lloyd Cushenberry, Pokic, Andre James, Aaron, like those guys, you can plug and play and you probably will have no problem, right? You're just never going to get high-end performance. You're going to get good performance, but it's never going to be elite performance. If you're drafting Barton or Frazier, you're hoping that they become tier 2 players in a year or 2.
Yeah, I just hate how small Aaron Brewer is. And I get it. He's an exception. He's proven to be an exception for the most part, but it's still just scary. But I think it's a great fit. Yeah, I guess that's up to the user. What is your cutoff for, I don't have to worry about this position for a long time? You're drafting, it's 53 rounds, long draft. You don't want to have to draft a center and then immediately kind of 4 rounds later, start thinking about, all right, when am I going to draft the second guy there so that I'm covered? You don't have to worry about covering yourself. And so if you feel covered with Barton and Frazier, then by all means go for it. Or even Brewer, if you're like, hey, I love the Dolphins, I love what they do with this type here, and I'm good with Brewer, then sure. But I think that has to be your cutoff, is you don't want to have to worry about center twice in the first 24 rounds of your startup, because you're gonna you'll drive yourself stir crazy, and you're gonna miss out on some opportunities elsewhere because you feel pressured to cover yourself at that spot.
Right.
So yeah, I would go Tittman, and then however you want to put Frazier, Barton. I think they're all in the same tier. That's sort of a personal preference thing, and I would not slide Brewer down too far after that, because I do like the player. It's a little scary how small he is, but Miami kind of mitigates a ton of that. They're all just kind of small and fast over there. Even Tua lost like 30 pounds, right? So they're all just super small and like super fast over there in Miami, and it's perfect for them. It works.
It does, right? So I think Tittman at 5 makes sense. Barton at 6, Frazier at 7. Brewer at 8, I think I would push the brakes on a little bit. I think Cushenberry, to me, going to Tennessee, they've drafted, strong offensive tackle in J.C. Latham. Peter Skoronsky last year at guard. Like, it's starting to become something, and they just hired, one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. I think I go Cushenberry right after that because, again, you get something that maybe it's never going to be 85 to 90 grading, but you might hit 80 once or twice, and that's very good for a 26-year-old guy.
Yeah, that's probably fair. As much as I don't really like much of the situation over there in Tennessee when it comes to his position in particular, I think that's a very fair point.
Okay, so Cushenberry at 8. We'll go Brewer at 9. I think now it's Andre James, Eric McCoy, or Ethan Pokic.
It's McCoy all day.
It's McCoy all day. Okay, McCoy at 10. McCoy at 10 because he's been the closest to reach that high end at just 26 years old. I like that a lot. 11 it does start to get a little harder, right? And actually, before we continue, why don't I read you my tier 4 just in case you tell me there's somebody in that tier that should be up here, right? And I think one of the names, depending on what you think of the injury history, could be, right? So I'll start with Ryan Kelly in Indianapolis, 31 years old, 77.2 grade last year. He's been one of the top centers in the league, but at 31, it might temper how early you want to draft him. David Andrews in New England, 32 years old, 71.2 grade. Similar story, has been very consistent, done very good job. Ted Karras in Cincinnati, 31 years old, 67.4. He's probably towards the bottom of that tier for me. Connor Williams. He's been fantastic. One of the best centers in the NFL, but the injuries have just added up at this point. He's still only 27 years old. 86.5 grade last year. It's been really good. How bad is the injury? When will he be back? He's still a free agent. A team hasn't signed him yet. Do they think that he's not going to come back for this season at some point and be healthy and lead them to success, right? I think that's the concern. But at some point, you have to be looking at 27-year-old Connor Williams and saying that's the pick.
I don't know. I don't think he's going to play this year. It's his second ACL tear. I think it was mid-season, maybe halfway through. I would not count on him. And this goes back to, again, you're kind of forced to cover yourself if you take this player. Yeah, it was a December ACL tear, and it was his second ACL tear. I can't count on that at all, and I think most other teams can't. Possible that an injury happens somewhere around the league and he kind of gets picked up as a vet to kind of fill the void during the season or something. But then again, what does that really do for you in all 22? That's a top 12 guy for you, not in any given week, not for me. I bump him all the way down. It's just one of those deals. It's like sometimes you just remove somebody from your board due to injury. I think this is one of those scenarios, unfortunately, because he was a fantastic fit in Miami. They know how to use their lineman there, and he fit like a glove. But I just don't see it working out.
See, I think he's a great risk to take if you draft a guy like Barton or Frazier and you do it later on, right? Connor Williams should be there later on in the draft. I think it's a great risk to take, right? Because yes, it could be a complete disaster and both of them do terrible and Williams never comes back to play a game, or it could go that, Barton gets off to a little bit of a slow start. Connor Williams gets signed and is, a high 70s player right away. I don't know, right? But I think it's a good risk to take at some point. Last guy on my tier 4 is Mitch Morse, who is now in Jacksonville. It's been a long career starter, 32 years old, 64.1 grade last year, but now being with Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence, that situation is getting a little bit better, right? They add Brian Thomas Jr. They now kind of are starting to find some chemistry, right? Trevor Lawrence is just a year older. And again, like those young quarterbacks tend to struggle a little bit with offensive line. They're not beneficial to offensive linemen. Trevor Lawrence should be getting his feet on the floor at this point, and a veteran like Mitch Morse could be a great fit for him.
I'm taking all of these guys in around 28.
Sure. Okay. All right. So
which to me doesn't put them above any of the names. He's kind of old. I would have addressed center at that point.
Okay. So then let's rank the guys that we talked about. Ethan Pokic, Andre James, Tyler Biotic, Kim Jurgens, Steve Avila, Cooper Beebe, I think is the names we have left.
Man, see, this is why you like center so much more than me, because I have to cover myself at this point with any of these names, and I just don't feel comfortable doing that.
Really? Okay. I mean, I feel fine about Ethan Pokic, even if I can't say his name.
Posick.
Uh,
Yeah,
I,
Ethan Posick.
I feel fine with him at 11. Like, I don't feel uncomfortable. I don't feel uncomfortable really with Cam Jurgens. Again, like, I think there's a floor to it when you're an offensive lineman in Philadelphia. It's just kind of easy, right? So I feel fine making them 11 and 12. I think that would be how I order it. And then my guy Steve Avila, like I love that guy. I think he's going to be incredible. So I have no problem with him. I have no problem with Cooper Beebe, even if he ends up playing guard, right? Like, yes, we're talking about centers today, but if you draft him and he ends up playing guard, either way, I think he's going to be a phenomenal player in the NFL.
Then you rank him however you want. As far as I see it, after those first 8 names, I'm waiting.
Okay,
So I think
I'm
it's
gonna
probably 10,
go.
I think.
I'm gonna go Pokic at 11, Cam Jurgens at 12. I'm gonna go Andre James at 13. I'm going to go Steve Avila at 14. I'm going to go BB at 15. I'm going to go Tyler Biotic at 16. And that gets me to tier 4. And I think Brian Kelly's the clear leader of tier 4.
That's fair.
Okay. So he's going to be 17.
Yeah. So if I'm waiting at center and then it's like, all right, let me take a vet or something here, I can comfortably start him every single week. Be fine with that. I don't have to worry about how I'm going to set my lineup at center for, any given week during the season. That's fair. I just worry about the runway given his age.
I think David Andrews is in that same conversation where you know what you have. He's a sure thing. It's going to be fine. It's never going to be great, but you know that he's going to be a starting center in the NFL as long as he's healthy and able, right? So for me, he's probably 18. And then I think I would read you my tier 5 before we start to rank anybody else. Is that good?
Yeah, I hesitate to call anyone a sure thing in that New England offense just because it still is that New England offense. But yeah, sure.
Okay. David Andrews at 18. Okay. So we have 6 more spots and 6 more guys, maybe? Maybe I only have, 6 more guys. All right. Perfect. So we said Ted Karras, we said Connor Williams, we said Mitch Morse, but my tier 5 guys now are guys that are extremely young, were either rookies last year or still young players last year, but just were very underperformers. And that starts with Juice Scruggs in Houston, who's 24 years old, had a 51.5 grade. Guy that you really liked. I know I liked him too, but he just didn't do it last year. And I don't even think he was the main starter at times last year at the center position in Houston. But I think he did get the reins at some point during the year. I don't know about a guy like him. John Michael Schmitz in New York, another guy that I didn't love, but PFF loved, right? They were really hyped about him. 25 years old, 41.4 grade last year. I expect it to be better. I don't think it could be as bad, right? Josh Myers in Green Bay, another guy that we had been saying year over year. It's like just kind of waiting for this guy to break out. Like hopefully it gets a little better for Josh Myers. He was a good prospect. 26 years old, 55.8 grade last year. Definitely struggled. I think there's another name now in Green Bay, Jacob Monk, who was a 5th-round pick out of Duke, who I actually liked his tape a lot. And what I'm hearing early on in camp is that he's getting a lot of first-team reps as well. So definitely a name to watch there. So I don't know if it's a, hey, I like Juice Scruggs, I liked, or you like John Michael Schmitz over taking a guy like Ted Karras or Mitch Morse or Connor Williams. It might be the way to go, but definitely if you've waited this long to get your one center, you're in a really bad position. We're just talking at this point about getting your backup, right?
Yeah, if you're still looking for a starter, the answer is Mitch Morse, and it's really not even close. Even someone like Juice Scruggs may eventually be reclassified to guard, depending on how he's utilized. I think he played more so guard than center last year when he came back from injury for Houston. So again, that you kind of have to worry about that a little bit, especially with young guys as they kind of find their footing and see where they ultimately end up in the league. Between center and guard, those guys tend to bounce around a little bit at some point. So that's something to keep in mind when it comes to Scruggs. John Michael Schmitz, yes, the Giants made some additions to their offensive line. It's like, okay, you get a little bit better here. They drafted a receiver, obviously, but I don't know. Runyon, it doesn't really do it for me. I think he's fine. It's a good addition, but it doesn't really change the prospects for John Michael Schmitz, in my opinion, as far as like, oh, his environment got so much better. I'm not a huge fan there. And it's until the Giants offensive line for anybody not named Andrew Thomas at this point is just, I'll believe it when I see it. and I tend to just shy away from all those guys, and we'll go from there. So I'm probably not putting him again if I'm shopping in this aisle for likely my center too, and I'm looking for maybe a young guy that could maybe do something. I don't think it's going to be. I'm certainly not betting on the guy on the Giants. It's just not going to happen anymore. We've seen this story too often. I would defer to you on the whole Myers and the Packers center position thing, but this is where I struggle because it's like I don't love anything that's really left. So if I'm trying to get two centers here, we got maybe John Feliciano might make a case here. I don't know, but I don't love any of the young names here really outside of this. Even if you were a draft Nick and kind of following us around, I'm not a big Cedric Van Pran Granger guy either. If I'm trying to just bet on a young guy, that doesn't do it for me. I'm really just looking at scraps at this point, and if you're asking me, I can't put my stamp on any of these names. So if I'm advising you, either get your surefire guy early in the top 12-ish or so rounds that you feel great about, or get your two locked up before round 25. Because if you're looking at the rest of these names, to me, it's either Mitch Morse or that's it. I don't love any of the other names.
For me, I'm going to take a different approach in my guidance. And I agree with everything you said. I think if you're at this point, it's very hard to put your stamp on anyone. And there's guys I left off this list that we haven't spoken about yet that are technically starters in the NFL, but like they might not be tomorrow, right? And that's the hard part. So if I were, taking a different approach, I think the approach I would take is get one of the guys before round 15. I think you can do that with the guys we've already talked about and probably one of the better guys that we've talked about. And then I think get one of the other guys, towards the end of the draft, just so that you have two. You should always carry two. And then and honestly, I think that the best thing that you can do is then just next year during a rookie draft, spend a pick at that point on a guy you like, right? I think this year, right, if this isn't a startup draft and it's a rookie draft, there's a good chance you could get Graham Barton, Zach Frazier in round 3 of a rookie draft, right? And I think at that point, I feel really good about a player in round 3 at the center position that I buy into, because everybody else is going to be chasing quarterback, edge rusher, tackle. And if you're patient and you have a need there, maybe you're picking at the end of the second round, early third round, I think you'll be able to get one of those guys, right? So that's the approach I would actually recommend taking. But just for conversation's sake, right? Garrett Bradbury in Minnesota, 29 years old, 60.9 grade last year, just hasn't lived up to his first round hype. And the quarterback situation gets worse. A lot of that situation gets worse really in Minnesota. So I can't advise you to buy into a guy like that. Connor McGovern in Buffalo is technically, I think, the starter right now, and he's just been terrible, right? So I don't know how to advise you to draft a guy like that. Bradley Bosman in Los Angeles with the Chargers, maybe that's somebody you want to take a risk on because the coaching staff did get so much better. They bring in Joe Alt. They're going to read. They're going to be really run heavy this year. So Bradley Bosman might be somebody you say, okay, that 50, low 60 grading will get better, right? Going from Carolina to the Chargers. That's a possibility. I don't know how to say his first name. I'm not even going to try, but Froholt in Arizona. Do you know how to say his first name?
No, I don't know. I thought it was Dennis. I don't know. Hjalte.
Okay, good try. Froholt in Arizona.
No, I'm not drafting Froholt.
Yeah, exactly. Like the film just doesn't support it, right? You just can't do it. Austin Corbett in Carolina has been atrocious, but that offensive line got a lot better. So maybe with the pieces around him, it gets better. Who knows? And then I think the only other one is the guy in the 49ers, Feliciano, that you brought up. Those are the only starting centers in the NFL, right? So like, how do we advise you on who to take at this point? It's really hard, but I think for me, it's the semi-sure starter, Mitch Morse, Ted Karras, maybe Bosman would be the next 3 for me at 19.
He's intriguing. I think that's intriguing. Going to the Chargers in that style of offense. away from what he's been dealing with in Carolina, that might be the play. If I'm sitting here and I'm looking for something that lets me go, oh, this is why he could have his best season in 3 years, whichever players I'm looking at. Bozeman might be the guy, and it might be because of that. That change of scenery is going to LA in that style of offense. I think that might be the play here.
All right, so we'll put him at 19, and then
I
Mitch
think it's
Morse
him
at
and
20.
Feliciano, and then it's
Feliciano. I don't know, dude.
Oh, come on,
pull him up. He's like 31 or 32 years old. He played. He has great grading last year, but it was for like 5 games. I just don't know if that's going to translate.
We're at center 21. I don't know. I agree with you. I don't love it either, but
I don't think I'm taking him over the possibility of John Michael Schmitz.
Oh gosh, I'm taking Feliciano over Schmitz. Fool me once versus like fool me 9 times with the Giants offensive line. I'm absolutely taking Feliciano over Schmitz.
Okay. All right. Feliciano at 22. We have to do 2 more.
I'm probably also taking like Titus Howard over all these guys, but yeah.
Okay. Do we want to talk about that?
No, I'm probably taking my 5th offensive tackle before I take any of these centers at this point.
Okay. For me, just again, being a gambling man, I think I would take the risk on either Michael Schmitz, Drew Scruggs, not Josh Myers, but Jacob Monk. And Monk, again, reports are good so far in Green Bay. They are not afraid of starting a guy they took in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. He might be 24 for me. I don't know. And he might not even playing a snap in the NFL. Center.
That's what I love about center. Here's what I'll tell all of our listeners, okay? We're almost at an hour. You've stuck with us this long. Alabama's got a badass center now. I think just transferred in from Washington from last season. Followed Kalen DeBoer. Dude's bad. He's like 200. He's like Aaron Brewer size. But man, he's freaking good. He is so good. So that just keep it on your radar for the rookie draft next year.
That's
right. This is what, if you're shopping in this aisle, you just go draft one next year.
We only have one position left, guard, to do. And that's going to be next week, I assume. After that, do we do a prospects to watch episode? I think that might be fun. First,
I want to correct all those mistakes we're seeing in some rookie drafts. Then we'll do some prospects to watch. I think we got a little bit of a buffer there before the season starts. But yeah, first let's correct some of the mistakes we're seeing in some of your rookie drafts.
All right. So we won't talk about 23 or 24. It's garbage. Take your pick, right? And I'll put out rankings. I'll get us all the way to 32 somehow. But for now, let's hang it up. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. We appreciate you listening in. Again, we have a major announcement that we're going to be making in the next potentially 24 hours, we hope. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, at all22_PFF. And again, leave us a review. Like the video on YouTube that you're watching right now. Give us that 4-star, 5-star rating. 5-star.
5. No, not 4. 4 means like I can't, like I hate you. No, just 5. Even if you think rating. We're 4, just give us 5, and then like in the comment, just talk about how much you hate Chris. But like do the 5-star first, and then
I love
then
it.
Critique.
Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in.